You're watching True Echo, where real voices rise through fiction, and the stories we tell reflect the truths we live. Today's episode is about one young woman who defied the rules to save a life, and how that act of courage ignited a firestorm that shook an entire healthcare empire. Stay with us. They didn't just fire me. They erased me. It was 7 a.m. when Harold Whitmore's voice cut across the marble lobby of St. Bradford Hospital like a judge's gavel. You're fired, Kayla. Leave your coat and badge now. At that moment, I wasn't a nurse. I wasn't a person. I was a warning. Everything went silent. The only sound left in the room was the slow drip of the coffee machine behind the receptionist's desk, and the soft gasp of the old woman in the wheelchair watching the scene unfold. I didn't move. I couldn't. My hands clenched the strap of my backpack. My breath caught. I had just finished the longest shift of my life, 12 hours without rest, without complaint. And instead of a thank you, I was met with humiliation. Harold Whitmore, CEO of St. Bradford, stood tall in his red tie and white shirt, sleeves rolled up like a man ready to dig a grave. For me. His words echoed through the hospital lobby. You violated protocol. You treated an unidentified, uninsured vagrant without authorization. He paused, savoring every word like it gave him power. A gross misuse of hospital resources. You're lucky we're not calling the police. I swallowed hard. My throat was dry, my voice caught behind a wall of disbelief. This wasn't happening. Not here. Not in front of everyone. My mind screamed, say something. Defend yourself. Fight. But I didn't. Not at first. Because I knew this wasn't just about protocol. It was about me. A 22-year-old black intern nurse from Riverside, who had dared to step outside the lines. Who had dared to treat a bleeding man who collapsed at the door. Who had dared to believe that saving lives mattered more than scanning insurance cards. I felt every eye in the room on me. Some were filled with pity. Others with disdain. And still others like Tiffany Blake's, smug, triumphant. She stood behind the front desk, arms crossed, lips curled into a crooked smile, like she'd finally rid the hospital of a pest. And then Whitmore said it. The words I would never forget. People like you need to learn their place. That was it. Something inside me snapped, not with rage but with clarity. I stepped forward. Calm. Controlled. I took off my white coat and folded it slowly. That coat used to mean everything to me. A symbol of purpose. Of healing. Of pride. Now it felt like a lie. I laid it on the reception desk. Placed my ID badge on top. And when I finally looked him in the eyes, my voice didn't shake. I saved a life, I said. If I have to pay for that, then I'm ready. He laughed. Loud and performative. You saved nobody. Just a dead beggar. And you just destroyed your future. The security guards stepped forward. One of them was Jordan Wells. He used to smile at me every morning. Today he couldn't meet my eyes. I walked past him through the glass doors, stripped of everything. But I held on to one thing. Dignity. Outside, the cold wind hit my skin like a slap. I looked across the street and froze. The corner where a homeless man used to sit, he wasn't there. Instead, a tall man in a gray suit, gold watch glinting in the morning sun, stood speaking into a sleek smartphone. Something about him felt familiar. His gaze briefly met mine. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? Then he stepped into a black Range Rover and disappeared into the city. I didn't know it then, but that man was the reason everything was about to change. I lived alone in a worn-down apartment near the river. Cracks in the walls. Drafts under the door. But it was mine. It was quiet. That morning after getting home, I collapsed onto the couch trying to breathe. But the phone rang. Again. And again. The number wasn't saved. A Manhattan area code. Finally, I picked up. Miss Kayla Thompson? The voice was firm. Smooth. Mel. My name is Elijah Reynolds. Senior partner at Reynolds and Rayner LLP. We need to speak urgently about the man you saved last night. I sat up. Are you his lawyer? Silence. Then, we represent Mr. Vincent Langston. The name hit me like a jolt of electricity. Vincent Langston. CEO of Langston Medical Group. Billionaire. Owner of dozens of hospitals and insurance firms. One of the most powerful men in healthcare. I stammered. Is he okay? He's stable. Because of you. But this isn't just about his health. It's about what happened last night. What you did. And what your hospital didn't do. My mind spun. If this is about preparing a lawsuit. No one is suing you, Kayla, Reynolds interrupted. On the contrary. You're about to become the center of something much, much bigger. I clutched the phone tighter. Reynolds continued, his voice now lower, almost conspiratorial. What you did didn't just save a man. It may have started the collapse of a corrupt system. Mr. Langston wants to meet you. Immediately. 1 hour later, I sat across from Elijah Reynolds in a glass-walled coffee shop in Manhattan's financial district. I still wore my old hoodie and jeans. He wore a charcoal suit and a watch that cost more than my apartment. On the table, he placed an iPad in front of me. On the screen, a photo. Vincent Langston, standing beside the President of the United States, receiving an award. My breath caught. That's him, I whispered. That's who I saved? Reynolds nodded slowly. And now he wants to save you. The iPad screen glowed between us like a revelation. There he was, Vincent Langston. Powerful. Polished. Alive because of me. I remembered the blood smeared across his face, his trembling hands, the desperation in his voice as he collapsed. Please help. Back then I hadn't known who he was. I hadn't cared. But now, knowing his name and his position, 1,000 questions swirled in my mind like a storm. I thought he was I stopped myself. I mean, no ID, no wallet, no insurance. That's why my voice cracked. Reynolds leaned forward. That's why they left him to die. His words cut through me. I felt sick. He's the CEO of Langston Medical Group, I whispered, more to myself than to him. He owns hospitals. He funds insurance companies. He practically runs half the private healthcare sector on the East Coast. And not one person recognized him, Reynolds said. Because he didn't have paperwork. Because he didn't look rich in that moment. He paused, letting it sink in. Miss Thompson, what you did exposed something most of us already knew but couldn't prove. Discrimination isn't just about words. It's about silence. About who gets helped and who doesn't. I blinked back tears. I didn't do it for recognition. I know, he said. That's why you're the only person who could have done it. He pulled out a thick file from his briefcase. This is what we've uncovered in just the last 24 hours. 90% of uninsured Black and Latino patients have been denied admission at St. Bradford in the past 5 years. 14 confirmed deaths due to delayed care. None of them documented properly. I froze. 14 people. 14 lives erased by bureaucracy. And most of those cases, Reynolds added, were quietly omitted from hospital records. To protect their efficiency ratings. My chest tightened. I remembered my mother, dying of cancer in our tiny apartment because we couldn't afford treatment. I remembered every time she clutched her stomach and said, "Don't worry, baby. I'm just tired." I was 10. I believed her. Until the day I didn't have a mother anymore. I looked up, anger simmering in my chest. So what now? Reynolds didn't blink. Now we tear the system down. Before I could respond, he added, "But we need you, Kayla. Not just as a witness. As a symbol." I shook my head slowly. You don't understand. I'm not a lawyer or a CEO. I'm a nobody. A fired intern. Reynolds smiled. That's exactly why you matter. You didn't save Vincent Langston because you knew who he was. You saved him because it was the right thing to do. That makes you more powerful than anyone in this fight. My hands trembled. I don't want fame. I just want justice. And that, he said, is exactly what we'll give you. He slid a document across the table. Mr. Langston wants to launch an independent investigation into St. Bradford's practices. He's bringing in federal oversight, media coverage, civil rights lawyers. But he also wants something else. I raised an eyebrow. He wants to fund a non-profit hospital system. One that treats patients based on need, not net worth. And he wants you to help build it. I stared at the paper. The words blurred. You're asking me to take on the entire healthcare industry, I said softly. Reynolds leaned back. I'm asking you to lead the charge to fix it. 3 days passed. I barely slept. I barely ate. The media hadn't caught wind of anything yet. But inside a high-rise in Midtown Manhattan, the investigation had begun. And its center was me. I met Vincent Langston in person on the 4th day. He walked in slowly, still recovering from his injuries, wearing a plain gray suit and no watch this time. But his presence filled the room. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He didn't shake my hand. He simply said, "Thank you for saving my life." I didn't know who you were, I replied. That's what makes it more powerful, he said. We sat across from each other. He spoke in a calm, methodical voice, like a surgeon outlining an operation. I built an empire, he said. Hospitals. Networks. Clinics. But somewhere along the line, I let it become about money instead of people. I thought optimizing care meant maximizing profits. You reminded me what it's supposed to mean. He paused, then continued. I was left to die in a hospital lobby I helped fund. Because I didn't have an ID. That's what it's like for people like me every day, I replied. We don't get second chances. Langston nodded. But you gave me one. And I intend to give it back, to you, and to every patient who's ever been turned away. He stood, reaching for a nearby folder. Inside were blueprints, plans, funding proposals. At the center of it all, a new kind of hospital. A model for care without discrimination. Without profit-first motives. We'll call it the Kayla Thompson Health Center, he said. I blinked. What? You didn't ask to become a symbol. But you are one. And symbols change the world. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because deep inside me something had shifted. I had always believed in doing the right thing. But I never believed the right thing could actually win. Until now. While we worked behind the scenes, Whitmore was busy playing king. He strutted through the halls of St. Bradford, barking orders, punishing anyone who questioned him, parading his latest profit charts like war trophies. He didn't know that the storm was already forming. He didn't know that the receptionist who smirked at my firing, Tiffany Blake, was being monitored. Her emails. Her chats. Her smug posts on social media. He didn't know that Jordan Wells, the security guard who once bowed his head in shame, had found the original security footage from that night. He didn't know that Dr. Martinez, the ER physician who helped me save Vincent, had decided to step forward as a witness. They were all coming together. For me. For the truth. For justice. And soon the world would know what Harold Whitmore really stood for. The first spark didn't come from a lawsuit. It came from a leaked video. A low-resolution clip pulled from the internal surveillance system at St. Bradford Hospital. It wasn't doctored. It wasn't ambiguous. It was real. And it was damning. In the clip, Harold Whitmore leaned against the reception desk, arms crossed, speaking to Tiffany Blake. His voice was calm but smug. Like a man who thought the world owed him nothing and still gave him everything. That little black girl, he said, I've been waiting for a reason to fire her. She made those poor patients think this is a church. We're not running a damn church. Tiffany chuckled. I swear she acts like she's Florence Nightingale or something. Always trying to play the hero. Whitmore's voice lowered, but the audio picked up every word. She just gave me the perfect excuse. The video ended. 10 seconds of footage. But that was all it took to burn a hole through the illusion. The clip made its way from Jordan Wells' inbox to Elijah Reynolds' legal office. From there, to a secure cloud database to a reporter at the New York Herald. And finally, onto the internet. It went viral within hours. #BradfordGate began trending before noon. By nightfall it was international news. Twitter was flooded with outrage. TikTokers reposted the audio with captions like, "They fired her for saving a life?" Instagram Reels stitched images of me in my white coat with voiceovers from the video. YouTube commentary channels exploded with coverage. But the moment that sent shockwaves through the healthcare world came during the evening news broadcast. Vincent Langston appeared on live television. No studio. No makeup. No rehearsed speech. Just a chair, a microphone, and the truth. I was the man who collapsed in the ER at St. Bradford Hospital, he began. Bleeding. Disoriented. Without my ID. I was left untreated because I didn't have paperwork. And if not for Kayla Thompson, I would be dead. He stared directly into the camera, unflinching. I'm a billionaire. So. A white man. And they left me for dead. So ask yourself, what do they do to people without money, without power, without the right skin color? There was no music. No dramatics. Just truth. And truth, spoken plainly, has a way of cutting deeper than any headline. The fallout began immediately. By the next morning, St. Bradford Hospital had closed its social media accounts. The mayor's office released a carefully worded statement promising to investigate any and all allegations. Whitmore issued a non-apology. We regret that Ms. Thompson felt unsupported, it read. However, we stand by our protocols and procedures. The public wasn't buying it. At my old apartment in Riverside, camera crews camped outside for interviews. I didn't answer the door. I didn't want to become a soundbite. I wanted to finish what I started. So I kept my head down. Inside Langston's office, the team worked day and night. Dr. Luis Martinez officially joined us. Jordan Wells became head of internal surveillance. Maria Gonzalez, the bilingual nurse fired for not being polished enough, was hired to lead the patient outreach program. And me? I was appointed director of ethical operations for the Kayla Thompson Health Center, a job I never applied for but was born to do. We combed through thousands of documents from St. Bradford, internal memos, patient rejection forms, audio files. One by one the pieces fell into place. Pattern of denial, racial profiling, donation trails leading directly to Mayor Whitmore's re-election fund. But the moment I'll never forget came late one night, sitting in a conference room lit only by a laptop screen. Reynolds slid over a printed spreadsheet, color-coded, line by line. "This," he said softly, "is the death list." Each name represented a person who had died after being turned away or delayed care at St. Bradford. 89% of them were Black, Latino, or undocumented. Some were children. Some were elderly. All were human. I sat in silence, staring at the list. I thought of my mother. Of every person who had clutched their chest in fear, only to be told to wait or go somewhere else. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was genocide by omission. And it was time for the world to see. That weekend we planned the strike. Not with protests. Not with lawsuits. With proof. Vincent Langston reserved the ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel under a fake name. It was supposed to be the venue for the Healthcare Executive of the Year Gala, where Whitmore would be honored. We didn't cancel the event. We hijacked it. The morning of the gala, invitations were sent, this time from Langston Medical Group. Executives, politicians, donors, all still showed up, unaware they were walking into their own reckoning. The room glittered with wealth. Champagne poured. Whitmore arrived in a white tuxedo, smiling like he had just won a war. And then the screen behind him flickered. Gone were the hospital promo videos and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. In their place, the leaked footage of Whitmore's own voice saying, "That little black girl. I've been waiting for a reason to fire her." The room fell dead silent. Whitmore turned. Then came the second video. A heat map showing areas where patient rejections were highest, all in poor, minority neighborhoods. Then the spreadsheet of the death list. Then Tiffany Blake's emails. "If it saves another homeless person, I'll ask Whitmore to get rid of her." And finally the footage of me, kneeling beside a bleeding man, soaked in blood, performing chest compressions. The caption read, "She didn't ask for an ID. She asked where it hurt." Then the lights came on. And I walked into the room. Not in scrubs. Not in shame. But in a navy blue suit, beside Vincent Langston and Elijah Reynolds. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Because the truth was already louder than anything I could say. The sound of a glass shattering was the only noise that dared interrupt the silence. Whitmore stood frozen at the center of the ballroom, the stem of his champagne glass dangling uselessly in his hand, his lips twitching but offering no words. Around him, power brokers, hospital executives, media personalities, and political donors all sat stunned, their eyes fixed on the massive screen behind the stage. The name Kayla Thompson glowed in white letters against a black backdrop. Then came the voice. "I am Vincent Langston." The room collectively inhaled. "On the 15th of this month I had an accident. I lost my phone, my ID, and my wallet. I stumbled into St. Bradford Hospital, bleeding, disoriented, and in need of immediate care. But I was left to die. What? Because I didn't have the right paperwork. Because I looked like I didn't belong." Vincent's pre-recorded statement played as if delivered in real time, each word hitting harder than the last. And while everyone turned away, one person stepped forward. An intern. A young black woman named Kayla Thompson. She didn't ask who I was. She didn't check for insurance. She didn't wait for authorization. She saved me. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. Guests exchanged glances, some wide-eyed, others already reaching for their phones. A few tried to leave, but the side doors had been discreetly locked by federal marshals. Then came the second voice, calm and unflinching. "I'm Agent Anthony Clark, Federal Department of Justice. At this moment, a joint task force has issued formal charges against Harold Whitmore, director of St. Bradford Hospital." From the rear of the ballroom, the doors burst open. Federal agents streamed in. Whitmore spun around, a protest rising in his throat, but it never made it out. "Thomas Harold Whitmore," Agent Clark announced, stepping forward, "you are under arrest for systemic discrimination, financial fraud, obstruction of a federal investigation, and embezzlement of federal healthcare funds." The clink of handcuffs echoed through the ballroom louder than the crystal chandeliers swaying overhead. Whitmore staggered back. You can't do this. This is my hospital. You don't know what she is. That girl, she's nothing." He was silenced by the agents flanking him. The media lights flashed like 1,000 blinking eyes. The cameras focused. Live streams lit up. The fall of a tyrant was no longer behind closed doors. It was broadcast. Tiffany Blake tried to slink away quietly. But a young female agent stopped her at the emergency exit, delivering a sealed envelope marked with the Justice Department's emblem. You are being summoned for immediate deposition regarding your involvement in the discriminatory practices at St. Bradford. Tiffany's face paled. Her voice cracked. I was following orders. Agent Clark didn't blink. Those orders cost lives. I didn't speak until the room had fallen still. Until every face was turned toward me, not in judgment, not in pity, but in realization. I walked to the podium, heart pounding like a war drum, and stood beneath the now iconic headline projected above me. The Kayla Files, Healthcare's Reckoning Begins. I didn't come here to destroy anyone, I said. But I wasn't going to let them keep destroying people like me either. Pause. Dead silence. I didn't break the rules because I wanted to make a scene. I broke them because the rules were broken long before I got there. If we keep telling doctors and nurses to value paperwork more than people, we'll keep losing lives. I turned toward Whitmore as he was led out of the room, still red-faced and sputtering, and said the words I had carried since the moment he humiliated me in that lobby. I'm not here because of you. I'm here in spite of you. The applause started slowly. Then it roared. Over the next 48 hours, the transformation began. Langston announced that Langston Medical Group had officially acquired St. Bradford Hospital, effective immediately. The first executive action? A complete name change. St. Bradford Hospital would now be called the Kayla Thompson Health Center. Within hours, a new sign was mounted over the grand glass entrance. All former staff were evaluated for retention under a new ethics and equity-first protocol. Dozens of administrators were removed. A new director of emergency medicine was appointed, Dr. Luis Martinez. Maria Gonzalez, the bilingual nurse once fired for not being image-appropriate, was now director of community outreach. And Jordan Wells, the security guard who had once bowed his head in shame, was promoted to head of hospital safety and ethics enforcement. Every hallway was scrubbed. Every sign repainted. But the real change wasn't cosmetic. It was human. No more insurance before treatment policies. No more denial spreadsheets. No more racial profiling buried beneath budget reviews. Instead, we created something new. Walk-in clinics in Riverside. Mobile health units for the undocumented. A trauma hotline staffed by nurses who understood the neighborhoods they served. In the first 3 months, the Kayla Thompson Health Center treated over 6,400 uninsured patients. 0 were turned away. The press swarmed the building daily. Not for scandal, but for inspiration. National news. Late-night shows. Editorials in every major outlet. But I didn't appear on any talk shows. I didn't sit for glossy magazine shoots. Instead, I walked the hospital floors every day. I trained new interns. I met every patient who had been denied before. I hugged the mother of a boy who finally got the heart surgery he needed, because we stopped asking for a down payment. At the front desk, where Tiffany once refused care, now sat Maria Gonzalez, wearing a bright smile and a new pin that read, "Ask where it hurts, before you ask anything else." Meanwhile, the investigation continued. Federal prosecutors worked with Reynolds and Rayner to uncover a vast network of corruption between St. Bradford Hospital, city politicians, and private insurers. Over $2.3 million in diverted public health funds had gone to the mayor's campaign. False billing practices. Unethical denials. And 14 deaths. Each one now part of an active criminal case. Families once ignored now found their voices. Lawsuits were filed. Settlements were paid. But more importantly, reforms were written into law. The Kayla Bill, passed by the state Senate, mandating mandatory care for all patients regardless of status at any federally funded hospital. The old system cracked. And through those cracks the light poured in. But the moment that made me break down, the moment I truly cried, wasn't on stage or in the press. It was the morning I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a photograph. A man in a gray suit, standing on the steps of the hospital, holding a newborn baby. Below the photo, "Thank you for giving my daughter a world where she matters." It wasn't signed. But I didn't need a name. Because I knew, that's why we did this. Not for headlines. For hope. They didn't give up without a fight. Power never does. 3 weeks after Whitmore's arrest and the announcement of the Kayla Thompson Health Center, the backlash began. Quiet at first, then louder. Political pundits accused me of being a media puppet. Anonymous op-eds appeared in business journals, claiming I had dismantled a high-functioning institution out of emotional overreaction. A viral video on a conservative blog accused me of orchestrating a deep fake, with Langston and faking the footage. They called me unqualified, inexperienced, a glorified intern drunk on fame. But I wasn't surprised, because I had learned that power doesn't panic when it's threatened physically. It panics when it's threatened morally, and it fights dirty. They began with the usual tactics. Disinformation. A leaked report claimed I'd stolen patient files. Completely false, but it was picked up by 3 tabloids and shared thousands of times online before being removed. Tiffany Blake, now facing multiple lawsuits, appeared on a podcast from an anti-woke network. She played the victim. "They're crucifying me for doing my job," she said through crocodile tears. I was following protocol. The system failed all of us. The host nodded, fueling the flame. "You're the real hero here," he said. "Not that intern." I didn't respond publicly, because I didn't need to. We were already rebuilding something that couldn't be undone. But the pressure wasn't just external. It was internal too. At a board meeting, one of Langston's senior advisors, an older man in a navy blazer who had worked with federal regulators for over 20 years, leaned in and said, "Kayla, we need to consider scaling you back from the front lines." I raised an eyebrow. "Scaling me back? You're a lightning rod. The media, the lawsuits, the tension, you're becoming the face of something that scares people. Maybe it's better if you step into more of an advisory role. Let us handle the politics." He meant well. But what he was really saying was, "You're too dangerous now. Too loud. Too black. Too female. Too right." I smiled politely, then stood up. "I didn't ask to be the face," I said. "But I'm not going to be your shadow either." Reynolds backed me up. Langston didn't blink. "Kayla stays where she belongs," he said. "At the center." Still, the threats escalated. One night, I came home to find a rock thrown through my apartment window. A piece of paper attached to it with duct tape. "Stay in your lane." I sat on the floor for a long time, staring at that rock. I could have packed up, disappeared, handed the reins to someone else. But that would have meant they won. And I didn't go through hell just to stop halfway. I made one call. By morning, we'd installed a full surveillance system and hired private security, not for fear but for preparation. Because a movement without protection is a target. But a movement that expects attacks is a revolution. Then came the hardest blow yet. A vote from the State Medical Licensing Board. Anonymous members proposed an emergency review of my credentials, questioning whether I had practiced medicine beyond my scope the night I saved Vincent Langston. It was a clear hit job. Retaliation disguised as policy. Langston offered to mobilize lawyers. Reynolds prepared to go public. But I said no. I'll testify. Alone. I have nothing to hide. The hearing took place in a bland government building downtown. Fluorescent lights. Gray carpet. 5 stern-faced board members sat behind a raised platform, shuffling papers like bureaucrats in a courtroom. I wore no makeup. No branded pin. Just my old scrubs. The same ones I wore the night I saved a life. They tried to rattle me with jargon. "Miss Thompson, did you initiate care without physician oversight?" "Yes," I said plainly. "Because he was dying. I assessed trauma, initiated CPR, opened his airway, and stabilized him until Dr. Martinez arrived." One of them frowned. "But you're not a licensed physician." "No," I said, "but I was a trained emergency nursing intern. And I followed protocol as best I could while everyone else stood still." They flinched, but I didn't stop. "You're not here because of what I did," I said. "You're here because I exposed what they didn't do." Silence. Then I pulled out the final card. A statement signed by Dr. Luis Martinez, confirming my actions were not only medically appropriate, but that if I hadn't acted, the patient would have died before even being entered into the system. Followed by another letter. From Vincent Langston. Sworn testimony. "I owe my life to Kayla Thompson. She followed her oath when others abandoned it." The board didn't even call a recess. The vote was unanimous. The review was dismissed. No penalty. No restrictions. But more than that, I was vindicated. Officially. And quietly, one of the women on the board slipped me a folded note as I walked out. "You reminded me why I became a doctor," it read. That night, I returned to the hospital just before midnight. The hallways were quiet. Clean. Different. A little girl was being treated for an asthma attack. A teenage boy was getting stitched up after a street fight. No questions about coverage. No paperwork delays. Just care. And that's when I saw her. A Haitian woman, frail, probably in her 60s, sitting alone in the intake lobby. She looked up, clutching a tattered envelope. I sat beside her. Do you need help? She opened the envelope. A copy of a denial letter from St. Bradford, dated 6 months ago. They said I was too old for the transplant, she whispered. And I had no insurance. I nodded slowly. Then you came to the right place. I helped her to the intake desk. Behind it, Maria Gonzalez stood up, smiled, and took the letter. We'll get you seen, she said. No charge. No delay. The woman burst into quiet tears. And I realized right then, they could slander me. They could try to erase me. But they couldn't stop what we'd started. Because this wasn't just a hospital anymore. It was a home. For everyone who had ever been turned away. The fire we lit in one hospital spread across the country like dawn. It started with whispers, quiet calls from clinics in Newark, Detroit, Oakland. Then letters. Then invitations. Then entire communities asking, can we build what you built? We didn't have a blueprint. We had something stronger. Proof. Proof that a healthcare model grounded in ethics, not profits, could actually work. Proof that treating patients without asking for wallets first didn't bankrupt us. It revived us. The Kayla Thompson Health Center had served over 10,000 patients in 3 months. Refused no one. Lost no one due to delayed care. And somehow, made more money in charitable donations and public support than St. Bradford had ever dreamed of. People wanted in. So we gave them the model. We called it the Kayla Standard. No patient rejected for financial reasons. All emergency care given without insurance screening. Every staff member trained in bias response and human first policy. And no one, not receptionist, nurse, or janitor, was exempt from ethics training. Vincent Langston pledged $100 million from Langston Medical Group to replicate the model in 5 major cities, each location named for a frontline healthcare worker who had once been fired, overlooked, or silenced. Detroit, Chicago, New Orleans, Oakland, Houston. And in each new site we did the unthinkable. We hired the people who had once been excluded. Maria Gonzalez, once dismissed for unprofessional image, became director of patient equity across all 5 cities. She created a triage intake system in Spanish, Creole, and Tagalog. Jordan Wells, former hospital security guard, was now head of ethics and surveillance for the entire network, tasked with ensuring no patient was ever mistreated, misjudged, or ignored. Dr. Luis Martinez, the ER physician who'd once feared speaking out, now trained emergency doctors in ethical trauma care nationwide. He became the quiet spine of the entire movement. I watched these people, the discarded, the disrespected, now becoming leaders. Not in name only, in action. And the best part? They didn't carry titles like armor. They wore them like purpose. We were invited to Washington, D.C. to speak, to testify, to build. The White House announced a healthcare reform summit, calling together top medical minds, private CEOs, and patient advocates. And somehow there I was, Kayla Thompson, former intern, former rule breaker, standing behind a podium beneath the Capitol dome. I didn't wear a white coat. I wore a navy blue blazer with a small pin on the lapel, a stethoscope wrapped around a red heart, the symbol of our movement. My hands trembled at first, but my voice didn't. I'm not here because I rose through the ranks, I began. I'm here because I was pushed out of them. Laughter broke out softly. Then silence. I was fired for saving a life. That says more about the system than it does about me. But I didn't come here to attack hospitals. I came here to ask a question. I paused. When did we start calling it compassion when you save a rich man's life, but call it protocol violation when you save a poor one? The room sat stunned. I let it hang there. Then continued. Healthcare isn't a luxury. It's a human right. And if the system we've built punishes those who act ethically, then that system is broken by design. After the summit, things moved faster than we could track. Dozens of universities, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, adopted the Kayla Standard as part of their medical ethics curriculum. The World Health Organization invited me to speak at the Global Forum on Equal Access to Medicine. I was 23. I hadn't even finished paying off my nursing school debt. But suddenly, the girl who once walked out of a hospital in shame was being asked to reshape the future of medicine. And I didn't do it alone. I refused to. Every media request, every invitation, every award, I shared with the team. The misfits, the exiles, the real heroes. When Vincent Langston accepted the National Humanitarian Award, he handed the trophy to me and said, Kayla saved me from dying. Then she saved thousands more from being ignored. But the most meaningful honor? The Kayla Thompson Scholarship Fund, created to pay full tuition for students of color, immigrants, and working-class kids who wanted to enter the medical field but couldn't afford to dream. Our motto? Every hand can heal. It was printed on every hospital wall, sewn into the patches of every intern's coat, scribbled in journals of ninth graders who now said, "I want to be like Kayla." But I didn't want them to be like me. I wanted them to be better. And then one night I returned to the place it all began. Riverside. My old neighborhood. I walked past the corner store where my mom used to buy groceries with food stamps. I passed the mural of the Angels of Riverside, our nickname for the paramedics who served the block without fear. And I stood in front of my old apartment building, paint chipping, windows cracked but still standing. A little boy came out with his mother, rubbing his eyes. He pointed at me. "Mama, that's the girl from the hospital sign." She smiled. "No, baby. She's the reason the hospital has a new sign." I laughed softly, then walked away. Because in that moment I realized, I didn't need to be on every magazine. I didn't need to be in every room. I just needed to know that we were changing lives. That was enough. Legacy is never what you plan. It's what you leave behind when the world finally hears you. 6 months after the first brick of St. Bradford was repainted with my name, I stood on the world's biggest stage, the United Nations Global Citizen Awards. Rows of dignitaries, students, healthcare workers, and survivors from 5 continents watched as I stepped forward to accept the title of Global Citizen of the Year. No teleprompter. No speechwriter. Just a small photo in my hand, my mother, smiling on the day I got accepted into nursing school. I held it up. "I came from a place where people like us don't get second chances," I said softly. "Where your zip code, your accent, or your insurance card decides whether you live or die. My mother died because of that system." Silence blanketed the chamber. I was fired for saving a life. But that firing turned into a flame. And now that flame is a torch carried by every person who was ever told they were too poor, too foreign, too black, too other, to matter. I paused. I didn't come here to be honored. I came to remind all of us, don't take revenge with anger. Build something so great that evil has no place to exist. That line lit up the world. In the months that followed, the Kayla standard was adopted in over 200 hospitals across the U.S., and pilot programs launched in Brazil, Kenya, and Vietnam. Medical schools rewrote their ethics courses. Insurance firms were subpoenaed. And at long last, the final reckoning arrived. Harold Whitmore, once untouchable, once the white-tide king of healthcare finance, now sat hunched on a plastic bench in federal prison, inmate number 8132004. 15 years. Convicted on all charges: medical discrimination, financial fraud, obstruction of justice, and willful negligence resulting in multiple deaths. His designer suits were gone. His donor galas replaced by cafeteria shifts and mop duty. His name no longer opened doors. It closed them. And in the months since his sentencing, not a single ally visited. Until one day a visitor was announced. He shuffled into the visitation room, expecting a reporter or maybe his lawyer. But it was Jordan Wells. No uniform. No bitterness. Just a calm face. And a white envelope. Whitmore squinted. "You came to gloat?" Jordan shook his head. "I came to give you a chance to see what you never understood." He slid the envelope across the table. Inside, an invitation to the 5-year anniversary of the Kayla Thompson Health Center. Whitmore's lips curled. "You think I want to see that circus?" "No," Jordan replied. "But maybe you should see the people who now live because you're no longer in charge." He stood, nodding once. "I'm not here for you. I'm here for Kayla." That anniversary was more than a celebration. It was a revolution made real. Over 37,000 patients had been treated without insurance barriers. 0 deaths due to denial. Thousands of scholarships awarded to students from overlooked communities. And that day Kayla's mother, once turned away from care, stood on stage as guest of honor, tears streaming down her face as she looked out over a crowd of survivors, nurses, and families now living because we had dared to build a new way. But Kayla? She stood quietly near the edge of the stage, arms crossed, eyes filled with resolve, not pride. Because this wasn't about her. It was about them. The closing line of the ceremony didn't come from Langston or any dignitary. It came from a teenage girl in a white coat with frizzy hair and trembling hands. A scholarship student. First-year med school. She looked up at the crowd and said, voice cracking, "I used to think people like me weren't meant to wear this coat. But now, I wear it because someone showed me I could." That girl's name was Amina Diallo. She's now Dr. Diallo, head of pediatrics at the Houston branch of the Kayla Thompson Health Center. Years passed. Buildings were renamed. Policies were reformed. But more importantly, hearts were changed. Because justice didn't come from a gavel or a press release. It came from every patient who was no longer afraid to walk through a hospital door. Every nurse who no longer feared punishment for acting with humanity. Every intern who now believed they were enough. And in every lecture hall, one sentence was printed across the front wall, etched in bold, black letters. Do the right thing, especially when no one else will. Kayla Thompson. My story didn't end in a courtroom or a headline. It ended in a classroom back at Riverside Community College, where I now teach medical ethics to students who were once told they'd never get in. I begin every class the same way. I'm not here to teach you how to heal with your hands. I'm here to make sure you never forget who you're healing with your heart. And every student learns what I once had to prove. You don't need permission to save a life. You just need the courage to do it. Kayla Thompson didn't ask to be a hero. She just refused to let injustice become normal. In a world that tried to silence her, she built something too powerful to be ignored, and in doing so, turned her pain into a movement. So here's our question to you. What will you build out of your pain? If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to True Echo, where real voices rise through powerful storytelling. Comment below with your thoughts, and share this with someone who believes the system can't change. Because sometimes, it only takes one person.